As a classroom teacher, each of your students that come into your classroom are going to bring different amounts of background knowledge, as well as each of them are going to be working on different levels. So you'll have a variety of different levels that you need to accommodate in order to best meet the needs of all your students in the classroom. Right now, we're going to be looking at 3 different ways and things that we need to think about in order to individualize our instruction to best meet those needs. The first theory that all educators need to be very familiar with is the zone of proximal development, or also known as ZPD. The zone of proximal development is the area where learning actually takes place. And if you look at the visual here, the middle area in turquoise, our target area, that's our ZPD. And that's where students are able to understand the material with help or guidance from somebody at a higher level than them. That help that we give them is called scaffolding. Okay? So this is the area where learning actually takes place. If we go to the purple area, which is when students are able to do the work without any help. So basically, the work is too easy. They can do it on their own. They don't need any guidance from the teacher or from somebody else. They can do it by themselves. If they're working at that level, it's too easy and learning is not taking place. If you go to the other extreme, in the green area where it's out of reach, this is when it's too difficult even with help. So even if you're giving them guidance, they're just not ready for that level that you're working at or that you're trying to teach at. That's too difficult, and learning is not taking place there either. So our target area for our students is to hit that ZPD right in the middle, where they can't do it on their own, but they can do it with some assistance from you as the teacher. So for each student, we need to hit that zone of proximal development, and for each student, it's usually going to be different, and it's going to depend on what is their background knowledge and what experience or what do they bring to the table, what do they already know about this topic or this concept that we're teaching. So the most common way to meet the ZPD, or the zone of proximal development, for each one of our students is to differentiate our instruction. And so you might also hear that called as DI, okay, differentiated instruction, in order to meet the ZPD for each of our students. There are 4 basic areas that you can differentiate or change with your instruction in order to meet those individualized needs of your students. Those are content, process, product, and learning environment. And we're going to take a look at each one of those individually now. So looking at differentiated instruction, we're going to look at ways that we can change different parts of the instruction, or what we're teaching or how we're teaching it, in order to meet those needs of our students. The first way that we can change it is through the content. Now, content is the material that you're teaching to your students. Okay, what is it that you're teaching? And you can change that content or adjust it for the different levels of your students. One of the things you need to be very familiar with is Bloom's taxonomy. And this is basically looking at curriculum and how you apply it. Okay, so I like this little visual here. Knowledge is the lower level. Okay, this is the most simple level. This is where you're basically just learning facts and memorizing information about something. And then as you move up higher to comprehension, you're getting a little bit more understanding beyond just the facts. Okay, and then application is when you're actually having to apply what you have learned. And then as you can see, you move on up to analysis, synthesis, and then the highest level is evaluation, where you're making a judgment or you're defending something based on evidence that you have gathered about something. So the simplest or the lowest level of learning is knowledge. The highest level is evaluation. So when you look at your students' needs, you can decide what level are your students working at. Some maybe need to be answering questions at the knowledge level for this particular thing that you're studying, whereas you may have some students that are ready to apply the knowledge. They can take that information and apply it to a new situation. Or you might have some that are actually working at the evaluation level. And you can actually give assignments to students and a content to them based on what level that they need to be working at in order to, so that you're hitting that ZPD for each student. Okay? So basically just kind of remembering the lowest level is memorizing facts. Highest level is evaluation, where you are making a judgment about something. In order to do that, that takes a lot of processing of information. I would keep this visual. It gives a lot of great key descriptor words, so that when you are giving questions to students, if you're asking them to name or repeat or to describe something, you're probably working at the knowledge level. Whereas if you're doing applying, change, choose, compute, or demonstrate, that's more at the application level. So I just like this visual. I think it's something that you might just keep a copy of someplace that you have to use down the road. The second way that we can differentiate our instruction is through process. Now, process basically is how you're teaching it. Okay? Content is what you're teaching. Process is how you teach it. So the biggest thing, easiest way to adapt here is to look at your learning styles. And we've talked about those before. You have visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Okay? Visual learners mean that they need to see it. Auditory means that they need to hear it. And kinesthetic learners are your hands-on learners, and that means that they need to get involved. They need to do something with it, have some type of activity with it. Ideally, every time we teach a lesson, we should incorporate all three of these learning styles into our presentation or into how we're presenting or teaching this lesson to our students. You should also keep in mind, though, that as you look at the process, give those students opportunities to really learn from the ways that they learn best. And then also, like I said, ideally you would incorporate all of these into each one of your lessons. The third way that we can differentiate our instruction is through the product. Product is what the students are going to create or how they're going to show you that they have mastered the content that you're teaching. There are a lot of different ways that students can show you. And the big thing here is just realizing that it doesn't have to be a test. It could be, but it doesn't have to be a test. They could also do a project. They could do a speech or teach the rest of the class about the topic. They could maybe act something out, a way that they could get physically involved and do some type of activity to show what they have learned through this process. The big thing here is to remember that give varying opportunities to your students to be able to show what they know about a topic. Everybody isn't going to be able to write the best paper every time you assign something, or they're not going to be able to be good test takers. So giving different opportunities to show what they have learned, because really that is the key of education, is that they're learning the content. And we need to give them different ways to show that, because they have different abilities and they have different sets of knowledge that we need to build off of. The fourth and final way that you can differentiate your instruction is through the learning environment. So the conditions, this is the atmosphere or the climate that you create in your classroom. These conditions should include both the physical and the psychological elements. So one thing that's going to be very important is to have good classroom management techniques in order to create that safe and supportive learning environment. And then with it also keeping in mind different learners learn best in different ways. So some students are going to learn best through individual work. They want to work on their own individually. Other students work well with groups. So giving different opportunities for students to learn in both layouts would be very important, and giving them those opportunities. Some students need quiet. So have you created a classroom where if they need quiet, they're able to work in that and with no distractions. So just your classroom climate, looking at how do you create that safe and secure place where all students feel like they can learn.